Hey there, guys. We're on lesson number 9, the last page of your homework this week in Unit 6. And this first section just has you solve some equations. We're going to be practicing these a bunch in class, so you should have a little bit of practice. It shouldn't just be foreign to you. Part A, you got 4x's that equal negative 28. So there's not really a good way to show this with a tape diagram or a hanger diagram because you can't have negative distance or negative weight. So you need to think of this as having 4 things that add up to negative 28. All right. So you know that you're going to have to divide here to find out what x is. And you know you're going to have to take your number, negative 28, and divide by the 4 parts that you're splitting it up into. And you got to use your rules that you know that a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So use that to your advantage and know that this is going to turn out to be negative whatever 28 divided by 4 is. All right. Now, since this goes into this nice and equally, that's great. But if it doesn't, you're going to have to use a calculator or another means to find out what that equals, right? But that one is going to be negative 7. So let's move on to the next one, part B. B says x minus a negative 6 equals negative 2. So this one, they're just trying to make it more confusing than it really is. Anytime you have a minus negative like this, just quickly add the opposite and make it into a much simpler problem to understand. Okay? Something plus 6 equals negative 2. So you know that you need to subtract these two things. And you always want to take the number that you have as an answer and take away what you're adding with to your unknown. So in this particular case, to find out what x is, you'll simply just do negative 2, take away 6. Another way to think about this, and I think this is probably the better way to think about this, the opposite of adding 6 would be adding a negative 6. So it might be easier for you to think about it like this, because the signs are the same and you know that you got to add their absolute values, and x is going to be negative 8. And that's an easier way to think about this. And you can always plug your answer back in. Is negative 8 plus 6 equal negative 2? You have your calculator usage now. You can use that to your advantage and do some of those checks with your calculator. All right, part C. The opposite of x plus 4 equals negative 9. Okay, so adding 4 is what we want to get rid of. We want to get rid of this 4. So the way that I like to think about this is to add a negative 4, which is the opposite. So negative x will be found by adding a negative 4 to the negative 9. And what that will do is that will tell me that the opposite of x is their sum, which is negative 13. And by logic, if the opposite of x is negative 13, then regular old x is just simply 13. All right, let's move on to the next one, D. D will work out in green over here. We have negative 3x plus 7 equals 1. Okay, so as we've worked out in these problems before, we can't split this up into 3 parts because the 7 only happens one time. So the next thing that we want to write is, well, what are negative 3x's worth if we get rid of the 7? Well, if we got rid of the 7, that means that we would take 1 and we would add a negative 7 to it because that would be getting rid of the plus 7. Add a negative 7. That's the opposite, right? And 1 plus negative 7 is negative 6. So we know that negative 3x's can be split amongst negative 6. And so what we want to do here to find out what the value for x is to divide the 6 and the 3. We all know that 6 divided by 3 is 2, but you're actually doing negative 6 divided by negative 3, which is a positive 2, because negative divided by negative is a positive. So that one turns out to be 2. Last one, okay, and I'll do this one in orange over here for E. All right, we got 25x's plus a negative 11 equals negative 86. All right, so we want to get rid of this negative 11 first before we can split these 25x's up equally. So the way I'm going to get rid of a negative 11 is I'm going to add a positive 11. So the 25x's will be worth whatever negative 86 plus 11 equals. Now notice that their signs are different. So we're not going to add them together and get 97. We're going to subtract them and get 75, but the negatives win. So 25x is equal to negative 75. This is nice because 25 will equally go into 75 when we divide these. And a negative 75 divided by a positive 25 equals a negative 3, because 25 times 3 is 75. So we get negative 3 for that one. Let's move on to the next section. That's just practice. You need to work on those, especially if you stink with your negatives. We need to get better at those. So work on that. The equations that match the diagram. Okay, so I'm going to write this two ways. I see three groups of x plus 5 equaling 18. So I'm going to look for that first, and there it is. Okay, so other ways I can manipulate this and think of this differently. I could think of it as having 3 x's and 3 5's, which would be 15. Let's see if that one's on there somewhere, 3 x's and 15. I don't see 3 x's and 15, so I can probably rule that one out because I don't see it over here. Let's see some other ways that this might work. If 3 x's are worth, or 3 of these are worth 18, then one of them should be worth 6. Do I see something like that? X plus 5 equals 6. Not exactly, but I see it right here, right? They're taking 18 and dividing it into 3 parts, so that's essentially the same thing, right? So I'm going to pick that one. Another way of writing 6 would be a third of 18, so that would also be this one, right? This kind of says the same exact thing. I'm not going to pick this one because that should be a 15, and I'm not going to pick this one because that should be a 6, not an 18. So just those middle ones. All right, let's match some stories. All right, we have a stack of nested paper cups that is 8 inches tall. I'm going to do tape diagrams for these. I think that'll be pretty good. All right, I got a stack of cups that is 8 inches tall. So I'm leaning toward 1 or 2, right? And the first cup is 4 inches. So the first cup takes up like most of it. And then it's going to be split up into every cup that's added adds a quarter of an inch. So you're going to be taking like all these extra little X's, right? But we don't know. But we know that every one of them is a quarter. So which one has 4 plus a quarter of a bunch of different X's? That would be number 2. So I'm going to match that one up with number 2. A baker uses 4 cups of flour. She uses a quarter cup to flour the counters and the rest to make 8 identical muffins. So I'm looking for 8 X's. That phrase right there just gives away that this is number 3. Like, there's no doubt about it. And then obviously the other one must be number 1. All right, let's just check and make sure. 8-foot piece of ribbon. She cuts off a piece that's a quarter of a foot, so that would be the little extra, and then splits it up into 4 pieces, 4 identical pieces, 4 X's. Yeah, so that matches. 2, 3, 1. There's your homework completed, making matches of stories, equations, solving equations, negatives involved. Lots of stuff going on this week. Hope you're getting better at it. If you have questions, as always, ask me in class, send me emails, watch the videos. It's helpful. I think the ones that watch them tend to do better on their quizzes and their assignments. So probably no fluke that that's happening. You guys have a great rest of the week.